So, you know, we look at mafia crime, right? And this is big in where I come from. You know, South Philly's a mafia stronghold. Almost everybody I know knows somebody that's been involved at some point or another in mob syndicates, you know? So let me ask you a question. They're all identified with the gang, the mafia, the mob. Does that mean that the person who's the bag man running drugs or running number tickets or, you know, taking bets or something like that isn't identifying with the same gang as the person who actually conducts a hit? You could argue, well, one's exercising one level of violence that's very high, and yet the other is simply on the team that's condoning that violence. They may not be performing an act like the ones at the bottom, but nonetheless, they're condoning it because they're on the same team and they're still helping the people who are doing that. You know what that's called? It's called a complicit gang member. Or, I would word it, a complicit cult member. They're just as complicit. The lower level people involved who are supporting the institution that runs their behavior are just as complicit as the murderers in that institution. It's the same thing with any institution. You could look at normal common street gangs. I mean, this is big on the West Coast with a lot of gangs. It's big in Chicago with gangs. New York, to an extent as well. Philadelphia gangs are a little bit to a lesser extent, but major U.S. cities have problems with gangs. Okay? Now, we will look at their actions and say, well, hey, what about the lower ranking gang member who is just out, you know, selling a couple of bags of cocaine on the corner? Well, they're still identified and are a lower level member of a gang that's conducting violence. They're conducting this violence for territory. They're conducting this violence for the right to operate within the region that they're operating in. Hence why it's called a gang. They control territory that they operate in and try to keep anybody out from that territory. It doesn't matter what level of involvement they have. They're involved with a gang that is violent, and therefore they are complicit in the violence that is backed by this gang. Well, that's one thing. Yeah, exactly. The people who are actually doing organized crime, no one thinks they have a right to do this organized crime. Correct. You know, no one would think, hey, the gang members have this right, the mafia has this right. You wouldn't think that, yet people believe government has these rights to conduct violence upon people. So again, you look at some of these behaviors that are conducted by the cult of ultimate evil, namely the segment of that cult called the police. Look at the kind of violence they conduct, throwing a paralyzed man out of a wheelchair because he didn't stand up upon command. You know, ripping a school child out of a desk violently, almost breaking their neck by turning their chair over backwards. Pepper spraying student protesters in the face with 2 million Scoville pepper spray. Kicking a handcuffed woman in the back of the head with a round kick. That's a big man right there, boy. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what that is, a fucking coward. That's exactly what that is. Let me tell you something, folks. These are the tame examples of police brutality in this country. Tame examples. Now, you look at the desk guy with the happy smile on his face. You know, oh, and notice the stormtrooper in front of him. You know, he thinks that's one of the people he should be, you know, modeling his behavior upon. Yeah. But what is that? What is that paper pusher in the cult of ultimate evil? He is a complicit gang member. That's what he is. Just like the bag man in the mob, just like the lower level gang member selling some cocaine on the corner. Doesn't matter what your level of complicity in the violence is. You're complicit in the violence. These people are destroyed at a soul level. They're husks. They are spiritually dead husks. You know, people will say, oh, Mark, you're dehumanizing people. No, I'm trying to tell you how spiritually destroyed a human being can become. And you know what? We have to understand, not all of them are going to be able to be reached with words. Not all of them. We may be able to reach many. That's what our job is to do. I'm saying we have to step up the effort more to reach people with reason and words and morality, an understanding of morality. But there are some who are destroyed beyond the ability to reverse their course. They're dedicated to evil, whether they even understand that their behavior is evil or not, because that's what a cult does. It makes their membership completely identified with their position in the cult. And then they just say, I'm in this far, I'm all the way in. And no one's going to convince me that I was wrong. See, this is thankfully, thank all of creation that I was able to extricate myself from when I was involved in the cult that I was involved in, namely the dark occult, Satanism. Finally, I was able to be reached with language and reason and persuasion. I also had to practically ruin my life and almost die. That's how hard-headed I was. And then I think I was that hard-headed. There are people who make me look like a light case of the ego. A light case. You know? So I'm trying to explain to people, you have to understand what we're really up against spiritually. How deadened certain people are spiritually. It's going to take Herculean, monumental efforts to try to mentally and spiritually reform these people. That's what the great work is. I'm not saying this to make you depressed about it. We have to know what the task is. We have to know it definitively, honestly, and accurately, or we're not going to get this job done.